Good afternoon. Obviously, Joe Weinberg, Bluebird Semaphore. And I'm going to pick up where I left off yesterday. And when I left off yesterday, I thought that was the end of what I had to say about the particular book. But I found out last night that there was a little more to read in the book, and I finished it. So now I want to put a wrap on that. And once again, it's The Third Chimpanzee by Gerard Diamond. And overall, we have to give this book a couple of thumbs up because it gets through a bunch of information that has been dealt with over and over and over by many researchers and scientists and historians, authors. But he gets through it, through those subjects, without getting overbearingly technical. This is information groups such as sociobiology and archaeology, genetics, and he gets through this. Any average person should be able to read it with comprehension, the book. And while you're reading it, you may come to the conclusion that the author is very biased. That he's biased because his understanding of the unfolding of extinction of the species of plants and animals on the planet Earth is a long-standing history and will be concluded in a way that most human beings are not going to be very happy with. As you read the book, that's where you think the guy's coming from. And certainly that's what I thought all along. And as a matter of fact, I was wondering when he was going to step up to the plate and prove us all wrong. Now, because I do think that early on, maybe in the foreword or somewhere, he kind of hints that it's not going to be all that tragic, that the human population has a few aces up its sleeves that are going to save it. So I read through the whole book, and I enjoyed it. I may have already talked about this, but I particularly enjoyed the part on language, because he made that very clear to me. How languages evolved, how they came together, how they diverted, how they spread, and that was very helpful for me to allow me to see better what went on in the past. For example, this is just an example, because I had no real hard evidence making me think otherwise. After reading his breakdown of the dispersions of languages through the continents, meaning Eurasia, Asia, Indonesia, and so on, all of those conglomeration of Earth that we call continents and we call nations and states and island kingdoms and all of this stuff, because I didn't know, and I'm not one to just state, well, I don't know it, but this must be the way it was. I had all of Eurasia pretty much as a blank sheet. Pretty much no people in Eurasia. I had no people in England, in Ireland, all of that stuff. I mean, I was sure that there had to be some people there, but maybe not a lot. Maybe very few. But for the most part, blank. Now, after reading this book, and particularly his discussion on language, I know that that's not true. I know that there were people, lots and lots and lots of people living in the Middle East, living in Africa, living in Eurasia, lots and lots and lots of people. And none of them were even Neanderthal, the people I'm talking about now, the background people that were there for hundreds of thousands of years. These background people were neither Neanderthal nor Cro-Magnon. They were some proto-human beings. And I'm still very knowledge-less on the namings of those peoples. But they had names. And the anthropologists, the archaeologists, the paleontologists, even historians had names for all these people. And an empty slate it was not. All these people were pretty much vying for supremacy. All these people were almost always at each other's throats, trying to get the biggest portion of the feast that was set out in front of them. Always. So now, after reading Diamond's book, I can pretty much put to rest the inquiry that cropped up at the very, very beginning of a short essay, something like Why the War in the Pacific Became the War in the Pacific. And I based a lot of the why on, the people that were there. But I although I had certainly had some ideas of the migrations, I had no idea where the migrations started and who were the people who were the migrating people. Where did they come from? Who were they? That was still a big unknown for me. I have certainly a better understanding of that now by reading this book. And for that reason alone makes the book worth reading. No doubt about it, this should be a must-read book for anybody who wants to set out to understand what happened during the tens of thousands of years that primate-like beings with things like intelligence and social manners and so on were tramping throughout Eurasia, Asia, the offshore islands, all over the place, except it seems like in North America and South America. They retain their isolation until approximately 11,000 years ago, when they were able to get over to North America via the land bridge to Alaska from Siberia. One of the factoids we all know that they pretty much teach us in the lower grades, although I don't know if they still teach that anymore. The problem I had with the book is that for 99% of the book, I'm guaranteed by listening to this guy that it's all going to end very tragically. So one of these many things he talks about is going to jump up and get us, and we're going to be annihilated. And he uses lots of examples, extinction of birds and extinctions of large animals. And he gives specific instances of these extinctions. And he gives some data to support it, like, I can't get the data in my head right now, but he's got it in there, I think that the one of them has to do with the timing of extinction. Well, but actually, the one piece of numerical data he talks about, which is easy to remember, is he points out that when he was writing a book in 1992, the world population was something like 10 billion. And he says that the population increases 100%, it doubles every 30 years. So, I got my hand out and I counted on my fingers that 30 years would put us at about the 20 something, 2025, let's say. And the world population should have doubled. So from 5 billion, it should now be 10 billion. And guess what? That's approximately what it is. And we're at 2024. So the thinking of the population experts at the time was correct. Now, if we use those same population experts and apply that information to our times, well, we're looking at, okay, it's 2024, we got 10 billion, 30 years to that, we're going to be in the 2050 range, 2050, 2055. Instead of 10 billion, it's going to be 20 billion people on the planet. Now, I say that's a pretty large number. Pretty large number. I mean, it could imply, if you want to be a thinker, that people are having a hard time reining in, you could say, well, once we reach that number, we have already become extinct. You couldn't survive with that amount of biological necessities going on around you. You could not survive. You would go extinct. However, up until this moment, I haven't heard anybody say that. So, people who have academic careers that they need to safeguard, they're not going to come out and say that or promote that. They're going to promote theories that may sound like they're thinking in those directions, but they're never going to say it because they want to safeguard their careers and they don't want to be considered whack jobs. Anyway, 20 billion. Now, I always think of times when I used to get off the subway in Manhattan, lower Manhattan, but maybe anyway, it could be in the 30s, the streets now, the street numbers. 33rd Street, could be 42nd Street, Port Authority. You would get out of those subway entrances and you'd be consumed. You just shuffled into a mass migration of sorts. Shoulder to shoulder, stepping down the highway to your destination. And that was years ago, because I haven't been a big Manhattan type for a long time. I shudder to think what it must be now. Getting off of the subway at the peak of work time. What do they call that? Commuter time. The peak of morning commute. That's when it seems to get the worst, because the distribution of people departing from work at the night is more distributed. So, people may leave, a lot of people leave early, 4 o'clock, then you get 5, 6, 7, all right? So they're they're streaming out, but they're not coming out in mass like they do in the morning, And I can remember when population was one of the agenda items. The talking heads would talk about on the evening news. They would promote the idea of staggering the work experience, getting people to come in. Some come in at 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on, to alleviate the pressures caused by everybody trying to get to Manhattan at the same time. Let me tell you, if you're driving into Manhattan, that's a serious, serious problem that needed to be solved a long time ago, which, as far as I can tell, they have not solved. They've done certain things that are antagonistic to the drivers of the world, but I guess politicians think that's what they're there for, to do anything they want just so they could say they did something. So they've reconfigured Lower Manhattan a great deal to try and alleviate the vehicular traffic that descends on Manhattan and then disembarks out of Manhattan in the evening. I mean, if I could get back the hours that I waited trying to get into the Lincoln Tunnel in a late afternoon, early evening, I could probably go around the world 3 times with that recalled time. But we don't live in a fantasy world. Anyway, getting back to Gerard Diamond and his book, The Third Chimpanzee. So I'm reading it, and I know I'm at the final couple of pages, and I'm still looking for the wrap that he's going to put some sort of glowing comment to more or less cover his academic life, show that he's not a whack job. he makes the characteristic statement that, well, all this being said, I am, uh, I am something, I am something optimistic. Cautiously, I'm cautiously optimistic for the future. After he's thrown his twin sons under the bus multiple times, saying they're not going to have anything when they get older. So it's all going to be corrupted and gone. So I mean, he says he's cautiously optimistic that human beings are going to all pull together and figure out all these problems. I don't see it happening. I see, even in the so-called advanced countries, a demoralizing lack of concern, a demoralizing acceptance of what is and what's coming. There's nothing close to intelligence coming out of any of these people, any of these countries. As far as I can tell, it sounds like they would like to get a handle on this and save the world from what human beings have essentially been building towards since human beings arrived on the planet. I mean, the author points out, and rightly so, and I'm glad he points this out, that this extinction policy that Homo sapiens are on, they've been on it since the first day they appeared. They've always been extinguishers, always, even when they weren't Homo sapiens. They always went out, exploited to the point where there's no more possibility for exploitation, and then they had to move on and exploit another region down to extinction, and then they move on. That's been the policy, that's been the modus operandi of these primates that are either early Homo sapiens, which they were, and or Homo sapiens themselves. They always been exterminators. So if you find yourself being in that career of an exterminator, you should say, wow, man, I'm in the center of things, aren't I? So the author paints this picture that extinction is coming, get ready for it. But at the last minute, he makes his disclaimer, I'm cautiously optimistic. Oh, great. You're cautiously optimistic. In the meantime, there's no more fish in the ocean, okay? There's no more ice on the ice caps. Great. I'm glad you're cautiously optimistic. You know, people have lost any ability to show to the rest of the world that they have even a modicum of intelligence in that thing that's on their head, on his shoulders. I mean, this is going downhill, you know, writ large. You know, you just look around, listen to what people are saying, listen to what they desire from their lives, and just you'll find it to be a hideous mess, So I strongly suggest the reading of Mr. Diamond's book, along with at least a couple of others of his. However, in the long run, I don't think the people that I really really have a lot of respect for. People like Rachel Carlson, and is it Aldo Leopold or Leopold Aldo? That scientist, uh, and many other scientists who over the years I've tried to stay uh, in some sort of acceptance of what they've had to say, and keep that as what the whole world needs to be following and trying to work towards. And I know that without trying to call up any names, E.O. Wilson is another one. There's been a number of people capable of good science and who I've read and agreed with to make me at least cautiously optimistic that something good could, not that I expect it to happen, but could happen as a result of having Homo sapiens on the planet. The problem is none of these guys that I'm talking about caught fire. These guys never showed one of the aristocrats how to make a profit. So they weren't listening. It's the only thing they listened to is how to make a profit. It's the only thing that matters in the running of the planet. The only thing that matters is, can I make a profit? You know? And if you read his book, you'll find out that when it came to the forest of Borneo, they were able to make a profit, but they had to destroy the forest to make the profit. When it came to other places, they could make a profit, but they would have to destroy it. One of the areas that's almost never talked about is the eastern woodlands of the United States, going from the east part of the Mississippi and going east through the states of Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, and so on until you get to the East Coast. It was once a great oak beech forest, just unending, capable of being the creative force behind a gigantic hydrological cycles where moisture is brought up root systems by the trees, evaporation takes place, and via wind currents, that moisture now that's in the air is swept towards the east where they get rain. So that whole thing was destroyed, and you don't hear much talk about it. Why? Because it was destroyed so people could make profits, which they did make. And they don't want to, bring up that fact. You let sleeping dogs lie. That's what you do. So all of those areas, they'll tell you how pretty they are. Very pretty countryside. The point is, what the earth needed was stepped on and annihilated. The only people that win in these situations are the profit mongers. And those are always relatively few people. Relatively few. Yes, perhaps tens of thousands of people can now eke out a living because the forests have been cleared. But that doesn't make me cautiously optimistic. It makes Diamond cautiously optimistic. I don't know what he was thinking, but of course he did all his research in New Guinea. Most of his research was done in New Guinea. 25 years of his life was pretty much spent there, so maybe he wasn't or isn't aware of the eastern woodlands, an area of the world that I've driven across probably 4 times. And the only time you see any forest is when you're up in the higher elevations going through Pennsylvania. Then you'll see some forest. But maybe West Virginia too. Anyway, I wanted to wrap up on that book. And I don't think there's much more to say. I'll just be repeating myself. The book itself has now been post-publication for about 34 years or something. I don't know how much of a success it's been. I suspect it's been somewhat successful. The fellow is fairly well known. Although, from what I've read, he does get a lot of bad marks from people who are probably getting their funding from the corporate world, because he doesn't say a lot of nice things about the corporate world. Every now and then he interjects, I actually was pleasantly surprised when I met with so-and-so from such and such a company, who, as you know, are a bunch of dirtbags, but I was pleasantly surprised when they showed me what they were doing. Anyway, it has been, and I have come across statements that place him as a person that overall they're not too happy with, And he wouldn't be the only one in academia who's been ostracized. I look back to one of my favorite academics. Is a guy, Thorstein Veblen. I doubt if that name has come across your list of must-read authors. But he was a guy who was operating in the early 20th century, 1904, 1911, 1918, all that early time. And his very famous book is The Theory of the Leisure Class. He got a bad rep because of that. The colleges and the universities didn't want him on his staff because what he was writing was absolute truth, with great insights about the people who were sitting on their butts, taking from the rest of the population the major part of the pie, and leaving the rest of the population to scurry for the crumbs. But he did it he was a sociologist. He did it with such tremendous insight, and he wrote very well. And whatever, I think that the people that were anti-Veblen probably didn't want the competition. My tag on him is that Thorstein Veblen, the last man who knew something about everything, is quite the personality. I think he was able, though, to continue teaching for the rest of his life. He had to move around a bit, but I guess you don't get totally kicked out because A, many colleges, they just need somebody who can get in front of a body of college students and sound like they know what they're talking about. So you just can't discard a good contender for one of those positions. So he was able to survive. And if you haven't read The Theory of the Leisure Class by Thorstein Veblen, and you consider yourself a well-educated person, well, you're not. Okay, that's all there is to that. You want to be considered well-educated, you have to read that book. Not many books you have to read, but that's one of them. Which, that whole idea of what constitutes a good education, that just opens up another sore point with me and many others. The idea that you can ask a college graduate who was Theodore Roosevelt's Secretary of State, and they have no idea what you're talking about, but they're a college graduate. Right there, you know what's going on. And right now, they seem to be giving these diplomas away. If you watch any television at all, and if you do, I feel sorry for you, but I do. I watch it, otherwise I wouldn't be able to make this statement. That hey, call this number, tell them what time frame you need this degree by, and we'll set up a curriculum for you. About $12,000 later, and a year and a half later, you'll have your degree, no problem. So, do we think these people are well educated? No. Do they think they are? Yes. Which, at some point in time, they'll be in a situation where it will dawn on them that they're about as ignorant as a field mouse. Listen, I don't want to denigrate people. What good do you get from denigrating people? Nothing. There's nothing. Right now, these people they've been hookwinked with these online diplomas and online studies. It's just you need to be in attendance if you want to go to college and get something from it. You need to be in attendance. Now, you don't have to go to college to get knowledge. You can get knowledge in a lot of ways. But if you want to go to college to get knowledge, then you're going to have to be in some sort of structure where people are coming together for the exchange of ideas. Because you won't get the ideas simply by looking at a book. You need to look at the book, and then you need to group up with others who have looked at the book for the purpose of trying to make some sense of it. Which makes me think of I call it a classical. One of the big points in my smallish academic career was after reading Kafka, the class huddled together, and the professor and all the students, they were trying to come up with what Kafka meant. And I'm not sure if we were talking about metamorphosis or what, but it was some of his works. And they all had their ideas as to this is what he meant. And so when they were all struggling with that, I simply turned to them. I said, hey, you know what? None of you know what he meant. He probably didn't even know what he meant. They just got to label stuff. Got to label it, and they got to make it out like they know. But, of course, I was laughed Dan. Oh, no, he meant this. Oh, it's so obvious. Look, he meant that. Yeah. It's very funny. Listen, we're done with Diamond. I think I read two of his other books, which are probably the only other two that I ever wanted to read. So I probably won't be bringing up Diamond anymore. He's probably about 80, 83, 84, 85, so no telling how much longer he'll be with us. UCLA, by the way. UCLA professor of anatomy. Professor of human anatomy at UCLA's Medical College, which somehow he does while he's trooping around all over the planet studying birds. Yep, that's what he do. Studies them birds. Okay, I gotta go. Enjoy the rest of the day, and we'll see you next time. Bye.